I said before with Mike Schur that we were trying to save the show, rescue the show, but now we're bringing in the heaviest hitter we've got. We're bringing in maybe the most popular person in the history of our universe. Wouldn't you say? Maybe?
I would say so.
That's not true.
Yeah.
There's no way that's true.
Yeah.
I believe it.
No, when it comes to fans of our show, I think you rate highest.
It's either you or Juju Gotti, I think, or maybe Lucy's making a strong run now.
Yeah, Lucy. I get. I was telling Mike actually when Mike came over to my house, I get tagged in a lot of the videos Lucy makes because people in a positive. Hey, you're gonna love this. Check it out, and it's true. I do love it. So.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah,
we love Lucy. You're on the medal stand for sure.
I want to acknowledge that though because I feel like so many of our conversations are about how toxic the internet is, over and over and over. And it's not all toxic. A lot of your listeners are like, hey, we love this. Check it out.
I was thinking about this the other day with McAfee growing up of a certain age. Pat McAfee seems like he's a little hurt by having been popular all of his life, and now he's not 100% popular. And it actually, if I'm not betraying any confidences here, it reminded me of how you entered and your experiences with fame, where I thought you were getting nothing but applause, and you were getting an awful lot of applause, but you were being, wounded because you come from the business world, and you're being wounded by the occasional cruelty in a way that you've gotten so much stronger on.
I just wanted to ask about C.J. Stroud.
We just did it. I just said we've done it so many times, and he just did it. He can't resist.
Tell me about C.J. Stroud.
We've got so much football to talk
He's
about.
So good.
Tell me about motherhood. Tell me about motherhood.
Yeah,
we'll get to football in a second.
Hold on. Yeah, Mina, this is the first thing that you've done since you've had a baby. Congratulations.
I thought you were going to say this is the first thing that you've done in reference to me having a baby. The way you I was like, Jesus.
No, this is your grand reemergence.
A baby who looks like Stugotz, by the way.
He looks more. He does not look like Stugotz. I said he looks more like Stugotz than me, but I think all newborns come out of the womb looking a little bit like Stugotz. They're a little squished, faces condensed, kind of the width to height ratio is Stugotzian.
I see it in the hands.
You met him.
Yeah.
Why don't you give him a review?
He's very sleepy. He was very sleepy, and I was afraid to touch him. A lot like Stugotz.
And Lenny is starved. Lenny is starved.
Yeah. My main takeaway was that Lenny and I got along so much better than we ever have because Lenny is so starved for attention.
He was loving it. He was in your lap, in your face the entire time. Mike came over to watch the Dolphins-Eagles game. And Lenny was on his lap the whole time.
Lenny, of course, is Mina's husband.
Lenny is a co-host of Mina Kimes' football podcast, The Mina Kimes Show, featuring Lenny and ESPN and Omaha production.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm going to start recording in a couple weeks-ish or so. So
I want to get to all your football
Do you miss
takes.
talking into a microphone?
I told Dan that it's like a clogged duck. All these takes are just... Actually, though, Twitter kind of negates that or mitigates it to some degree because I just do share some of my opinions. But yeah, it's been interesting to watch football without really having a place to put the opinions, though, for the first time in like 5 or 6 years.
Yeah. You and I, because the Eagles were playing, we talked a lot about the brotherly shove.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we kept saying is, well, how can you ban this? No one's gotten hurt. And since then, Brock Purdy got hurt. Yeah. So the rest of the league, I imagine, is going to propagandize this Brock Purdy injury as a reason as to why they should do this. But you were telling me something that I hadn't considered is that while the Eagles are the best at it, everyone is pretty good at this play.
Yeah, I think there's this like narrative that only the Eagles are good at it, but some teams have been pretty successful. Kaylin Collar did a really good piece. She's been kind of the tush push. How do we all agree to do brotherly? The Eagles got us all to say that. Yeah. And that, I think, is, by the way, hurting their cause because not only is there this narrative that only the Eagles are good at it, it now has a Philadelphia-centric name, which if I'm Howie Roseman, I'm like, cut this out. No, we got to generalize it, and we got to propagate or draw attention to the instances where other teams are good at doing it. Because the worst thing for Philadelphia is if there's the belief that only they are good at it. I think the Bears and the Bills were the two teams she singled out as having pretty high success rates doing it. I think it's because when the other teams are bad at it, notably the Giants, like 2 offensive linemen got hurt, it is so buffoonish looking that we remember that. Like all things fourth down related, we only remember the failures. Whereas other teams have had success. I mean, Josh Allen is a load. Of
Kenny
course
Pickett looked bad at it, but it got a first down somehow. in that game because Mike Tomlin is a wizard of some sort, a master of the dark arts. Then that's the only way that you can explain it. We were talking some earlier this week about Myles Garrett and how there were guys in individual generations, like Julius Peppers would stick out as someone that looked the part and played the part, Reggie White also. But in this generation, there's like 4 guys that have a pretty good claim to Defensive Player of the Year. What Myles Garrett is doing in improving and impacting the result of the game. Every time TJ Watt is playing a big game, he's impacting the result.
It seems to me, though, that Myles Garrett is better than Micah Parsons and Watt and Bosa's. They're all, but Myles seems better to me. And maybe it's because of the physical strength. It's not. I'm not just seeing a body type that is quick and faster than everyone else, but he's so clearly stronger than everyone else too.
Yeah. I mean, I think that there's like probably a top tier of like 4 guys. You mentioned some of them. Maybe 3 actually at this point. No, 4. I'll put Watt, Bosa, Parsons, and Garrett in that tier. And right now, Myles Garrett is Defensive Player of the Year. I do think his physique stands out. I also think, though, that on tape, Micah Parsons is as fast and strong. Not as, but like, it's pretty similar.
Is it the running game that's maybe pushing Myles
Garrett? I think that how they're using him this year, I mean, when you see clips of him lined up over the A gap, like doing Allen Iverson style crossover, you're like, oh my God, that's the craziest thing I've ever seen. And you can see the terror in the eyes of the offensive linemen because they're not sure where he's coming from. I think the Browns defense is so good, has been so good that's helped him as well, like stand out, and he gets to play with better defensive linemen. But it's, there's a thing going around the NFL right now where offense is down. I'm sure you guys have noticed that. And part of it is because there are so many good edge rushers. Like there's that tier, but then there's a second tier that's really, really good. It feels like every team has a superstar edge rusher at the moment, and they're all being deployed, and not all of them, but a lot of them are being deployed in really interesting ways. But yeah, he's been, a defensive player won't win MVP, but if there was he is single-handedly winning games for that football team that you no longer.
PJ Walker keeps playing football games.
I wanted to ask you about Brock Purdy because he mentioned Brock Purdy. I find super interesting this part of the Brock Purdy story. You know better than most that we have evaluated quarterbacks very poorly for a long time at various points. Basically, if you won football games, you could be Tim Tebow, and we'd be confused about what the assessment should be about your quarterbacking skill. But what I am seeing in the instantaneous nature of us needing to have an assessment on what Brock Purdy is and assuming that the system is why Brock Purdy is, I couldn't believe the other day that our evaluation, it seemed like, went very quickly from Brock Purdy may be an elite quarterback to Brock Purdy is what I said he is, a system quarterback. And all of that analysis was being pushed without the knowledge. He was a lot worse after he seemingly got that concussion than he was before that. The 2 interceptions and whatever you're blaming him for, because you're saying win one on the road, win one late, win one in a pressure situation. He's concussed, and we didn't know he was concussed.
I think that's true. I also think he, having watched his tape throughout his career, does put the ball in harm's way a little bit and has gotten away with some throws that he could have been turned over. In other instances, he was punished for it. In this game, he was also concussed. It's very, as with all things quarterbacking, it's hard to parse out the individual responsibility from the context. And of course, with Kyle Shanahan quarterbacks, the context is so different from other teams that it makes it even harder. Right now, we are seeing Jimmy Garoppolo separated from that context. It looks very different. Now, he's older and he's injured at the moment. He's been battling injuries, but which isn't to say Brock Purdy is entirely a product of the system and he's Garoppolo 2.0, but I think that the Garoppolo case is illustrative of how much that offense, what it does for quarterbacks. And people always point to, Kyle, before he had Purdy, he wasn't winning as much, but the team wasn't what they are right now. Like, it drives me crazy when people bring up Kyle Shanahan or quarterback numbers from before the last couple of years. They didn't have a team of all pros. When Kyle Shanahan got to San Francisco, the skill players were bad. So it's actually really noisy to bring in quarterback stats, win-loss records from those years. it's hard to evaluate him. And I say that not to say he's bad. I don't think he's bad. I think he's played really well in that context of that system.
But does it matter? Does it matter that Tua might look more like Kenny Pickett in Kenny Pickett's offense, and that Kenny Pickett might look a little more like Brock Purdy in San Francisco's offense? Does it matter why the quarterback is looking excellent?
When you say does it matter, I think it's like, well, what's the question being asked?
How good is this person?
How good is the quarterback?
How good is the quarterback independent of all of the variables that go into quarterback assessment? If I throw Patrick Mahomes on any team, he's going to be good, correct?
Yes. It matters when you're making decisions about the quarterback. So if you're a team like Las Vegas and you're like, okay, we're going to grab this guy from this offense, that's when it matters. I guess it matters if we're trying to have abstract conversations, as we do, of like, how good is the quarterback, whatever. But it doesn't matter when you're talking about the quarterback. Can he be successful on this team? Tua is a perfect fit for that offense because of his skill set in terms of the accuracy and anticipation. Yeah, we all know this. So the question, what is Tua in a vacuum? It doesn't matter right now. It would matter, I think, when you're if he was leaving the team.
Well, it's going to matter when they have to pay him.
When they have to pay him.
It's going to matter when there are competition for what is his value.
But the coach is going to stay. I think some of the players we'll see when Tyreek Hill eventually coasts down, but Jalen Waddle will still be on that team. You're still going to have really fast players. You've got an innovative coach. You have a quarterback who's a really good fit with the coach. You have to consider all of these factors. I hope I don't sound like I'm equivocating, but I think like too often when we talk about quarterbacks, it always comes down to the in a vacuum. How do we rank them?
She hasn't gotten any better about the equivocation. She still has way too much context. She's got to get better at the take. She's got to tell us.
The way we talk about quarterbacks is stupid.
Yeah. Well, it's only going to get dumber if Sam Darnold has a good game.
I know. I made a joke about it.
And he will have a good game.
I mean, it's going to be so toxic. But you notice, right, the most toxic, it's moved from Tua to Purdy this year. It used to be Tua. Now it's Purdy. Yeah. The most toxic conversations around quarterbacks are always the ones where it's hard to isolate them from the context.
It's funny, though. It's legitimately funny that we're sitting here and we don't know how good Brock Purdy actually is.
He's so cheap, too, which is another thing that matters when we talk about him. Like, the fact that he is that cheap makes, it doesn't have to be as good because of what it allows them to do with the rest of the team. It's like, what do they call it? The great man theory of, history. We do this with quarterbacks, and we really, especially I think at a moment where we have certain coaches who are so good at scheming and so many skill players who are so talented right now. That's another thing happening. Oh my God, the wide receiver play, the young wide receiver play in the NFL right now is insane. We shouldn't subscribe to this great man theory when it comes to quarterbacks. You don't need Patrick Mahomes to be really good in the end, for your team to be really good in the NFL.
It seems like it helps.
Yeah. It does help.
That's why we came out to Hollywood, to get that analysis from Mina. Patrick Mahomes will help your team.
Mina, in line with the last segment that we just had about wondering aloud about quarterback evaluation, there's been one name that we've been wondering about for a decade, and it's Kirk Cousins. And he has value this year. Yeah. And while the contract number is big, there are some unique things about that contract that might make it appealing to acquire him. And he'd be an upgrade over a lot of these teams that would seemingly be a Kirk Cousins away.
Jets in San Francisco.
You mean right now, in season?
In season.
In season, it's a very affordable contract.
But Jets and San Francisco are the two that are most associated.
Mina has another team that it would make a lot of sense for.
There's a few teams, I think, that he would make sense for. But he has a no-trade clause, which is important. Mm-hmm. I personally think if I'm Kirk Cousins and you're looking at a team like Atlanta or Cleveland, which I don't think they'll do it because of the Watson contract, I would go there, the Jets. He should want to, I would think he would want to be on, Minnesota, they're going to compete, but they're not a playoff. They're not a good team. I think if I were him, I would want to play for a good team. I don't know what matters to him.
The Jets can't be in play, though. If Aaron Rodgers is going to come back week 13 or week 14, if he's trying to come back, okay, he's not going to come back.
It would be unprecedented. It'd be a medical marvel.
Yeah. To talk about the Jets season as if him coming back week 13 is a realistic proposition, I think does a disservice in that, you have to mention it, but it shouldn't guide their decisions at the position.
Yeah, I agree.
But Kirk Cousins doesn't win them the Super Bowl.
I think he could.
He might.
I think that team with Kirk Cousins could win the Super Bowl. I really do. I'm like a little bit Kirk-pilled lately. I think I've arrived at the place where I think he's underrated as a quarterback. And actually, I think in that quarterback series, they were asked that, and both Mahomes and Mariota said Kirk Cousins when they were asked who's an underrated quarterback. Obviously, this is easier to say coming off of a Monday night game, which is maybe one of his best performances in the NFL, certainly his best performance in primetime. But I've actually thought this for the last, I want to say like year and a half or so. He is taking risks he didn't used to take as a quarterback in terms of throwing downfield and attempting challenging throws. He's always had the throwing ability in the but he's always been a little bit risk-averse.
I was impressed, though, by Monday night against, whether San Francisco is healthy or not, doing that without Justin Jefferson, having that game and throwing whatever it was 55 times because they knew they had a hot quarterback, and doing it in prime time when he's had like one decent prime time game. I was stunned by all of that.
I think you saw the difference between there's this kind of joke in the football nerd internet that there's like, when you tier quarterbacks, there's the Kirk Cousins tier of quarterbacks. You throw in Purdy, Tannehill, like all the Shanahan quarterbacks, we call them. And then Kirk Cousins is the best of the Kirk Cousins tier. I think you saw last night, it's like, oh wait, he might actually be above his own tier of quarterback. When I try to rank quarterbacks for the season, which I know I just spent 15 minutes lashing at the concept of trying to evaluate quarterbacks in a vacuum and making fun of it, and yet I do it as well. I do rankings. I usually end up putting him in that 10 to 15 range. People were laughing at, I think Aikman said he's a top 10 quarterback.
Right. Yeah. It's such a trick. I remember saying Rex Grossman was a top 10 quarterback just because I couldn't find 9 other quarterbacks that everyone can agree
were because
good.
Once you get to number 8, like 8 through 15 are pretty interchangeable.
But the 10th best quarterback in that league is better than he was when Rex Grossman was playing. Like Kirk Cousins, I think everyone listening to this might have doubts about Kirk Cousins, but would also know, okay, he's serviceable. Everything might need to be right for him to win a championship, but he's serviceable. Like he's somebody that you could pay money and feel decent about your quarterback play.
Well, San Francisco is the ultimate case study for it's like in these big moments throughout the Jimmy Garoppolo era, he was probably the 15th best quarterback who was putting up video game numbers. All the stats are just fake in that offense. But then in these like huge moments, notably the Super Bowl, he couldn't make that one throw. Was the difference between. So it's like, okay, well, how good does our quarterback have to be? Is Kirk Cousins the guy? And they took the leap with Trey Lance. They're like, we're going to try for the Mahomes thing, which is to say, let's take a shot at a quarterback with tools who maybe can elevate the offense. Obviously, it was they mis-scouted him or whatever. Is Kirk Cousins splitting the difference? Is that the difference? Will that be enough for us or for these other teams that we've been talking about?
It's interesting that we've come around on him to a degree that he presents a clear upgrade at the position over with regard to some pretty good teams, and Cleveland being one of them. And not to just fixate on the quarterback position, but this is an organizational call if they were to entertain. And Stefanski does have ties to Kirk Cousins. They've got a really bizarre situation right now with Deshaun Watson. He clears a concussion protocol, but he doesn't return to the game. PJ Walker starting again this week against the Seattle Seahawks. Weird reporting going on surrounding the Deshaun Watson injury situation. In your opinion, I know you're plugged in. What's going on here?
So it's not irresponsible to say it's weird because the weird comments are coming from the coach. Mm-hmm. It's not even like the reporting around it, like, oh, who knows what's the severity of the injury in the arm, and we're hearing different reports. No, your own coach was saying he was fine. Your own coach was like, yeah, we kept him out even though he was medically cleared. And then your quarterback saying, no, I wasn't clear. Like, it's confusing. And then right after the game, your own coach is saying, it's on to Seattle. Deshaun Watson's going to be a quarterback. Then days later, it's like, no, actually, there's this reporting. Oh, he's got this injury. It's really serious. He might be out for weeks.
Yeah. Oh, it hurts baseball players like 4 to 6 weeks. I saw that. And you can understand where that's probably coming from. Yeah. Is all of this injury and the spin on it coming from a specific camp? Because it doesn't seem like the organization and the player are aligned.
Micah has said somebody's lying, and
it feels like someone's lying.
You love to shout that, and in all circumstances, someone's lying allows us to.
The theory that I'm running with here, Mina, is that an injury like this, ambiguous, hard to nail down a timeline for, conveniently does extend a timeline in which Deshaun Watson would be judged against. And when you have that contract, and when you're lacking in confidence, and when the film that you've put out there has been such, this could be a convenient injury.
I think Mike has created a scenario, a conspiracy theory, where Deshaun Watson is having surgery just to protect not having to play anymore and show that he's not as good at football as he used to be.
I don't know who's lying, but I do know this. Before the season, I think we maybe even talked about it, I was like, by mid-season, if Watson's not playing well, and I think we can all agree he's not playing well, you can, again, the question is whether he's hurt.
The Titans screw up all these samples too, because people just point to that. He was good against it. The Titans are terrible.
He was also playing poorly before the injury. We talked about it on Pablo's podcast. Anyways, if by, I said midway through the season, we're not even there yet, he's not playing well, you are going to, the covering of the asses, which I realize is unfortunate language when we talk about this particular player, is going to start, and it's going to come from all sides because someone fucked up. And who was the driving force behind the acquisition? Was it the owner? Was it the GM? I mean, the GM ultimately does bear responsibility, Andrew Berry, for this. Yeah. He somehow escaped.
The reporting on this was, and the statements from the owner, the responsibility lies squarely on Jimmy Haslam's daughter. I think everyone can agree.
That press conference, by the way, is not going to age well. Oh my God. The coach, everyone's going to start this always happens in the NFL where you start getting reports. It's like, oh, he never wanted him, or, oh, this, the coach actually he wasn't actually hurt, whatever. The point is, fast and furious, everyone's going into job saving mode, or wants to preserve some degree of their reputation. And you're going to start, this is like so predictable. Of course, you're going to start getting weird reports coming from all sides that would seem to impute someone else for the failure. And it's so stark because you have a team with a Super Bowl caliber defense. That, I think, maybe was not something that everybody saw coming, where it's so obvious that all they need is competent quarterback play. If Jacoby Brissett was still on this team, they would be viewed as competitive.
Speaking of weird injury stuff, there were a couple that got my attention last week. The Bijan Robinson thing, where he has headaches at night, doesn't seem to have a history of migraines, and wakes up in the morning and says he's so foggy that he's trying to play but doesn't know where he is super confused. And I'm listening to that and thinking, well, how does this happen? What happened to his head that would make all of this so? And then I juxtaposed it against Jamal Adams is fighting with concussion doctors on the sidelines. And I'm like, is something happening with the heads here that is in this nebulous area where we don't know what the science is? We don't know whether Brock Purdy had a concussion here. What is happening that Jamal Adams would be fighting with doctors that way? And what is happening that Bijan Robinson is suddenly unavailable for a game and nobody had any notice?
Well, the Robinson thing, I mean, I used to get migraines. It can be really, really brutal. So I don't know in terms of like what exactly he's dealing with. The way the Falcons handled it was strange, which is why the NFL, I mean, I don't care what Arthur Smith says. He's very combative about it. Yeah. He's kind of a combative dude with the media.
It continues to be strange.
It's weird. Yeah. The timing of it, okay, wait, we can use him only for this. It's situational. It's weird.
Arthur Smith saying he'd rather talk world politics than the drama of that he was suggesting. Why can't we talk about, no, not climate change. Let's talk about Israel, Arthur. You want to talk about everything happening there?
He's kind of defensive generally with the press. So, but it's like, don't, it was odd, but I'm not I don't know what's going on with him. Adams too. That was weird because the first concussion where he got into the doctor, people were like, "How can you fine him for this? He's concussed." Everybody said he's concussed, but then the second time where he got into the doctor, he wasn't concussed. So so I think that was just nobody really knew what to do with that the second time around. But this is the NFL. Their injury designations are always going to be a little bit strange. I mean, the Purdy thing, we didn't even know he was concussed until days later. Yeah. And then you saw it and you're like, oh, yeah, obviously. But you could do that so many times on a Sunday. You could pull out a play and say he was clearly concussed. I mean,
We've got a minute left in this segment. And there's a lot of local audience that Maybe in one time, probably when in your mentions last season when the Tua
there's still a
discourse.
guy making videos about stuff. Sorry.
But,
anyways,
but you're DolphIN.
I don't want to do this.
Are you
with,
DolphIN?
I don't want to
Or
do
you
this
DolphOUT?
with the 1 minute.
I'm
I want to.
DolphIN.
I want to
You're
talk to
DolphIN?
her about
I've
the
been
Dolphins
super-
in more than a minute, Mike. You don't want more
No,
than a minute.
no, we cut
of
right to
Mina?
it. She's DolphIN. She's not DolphOUT.
I'm still DolphIN. I think the Eagles loss we watched together had a lot to do with like finally the injuries on the offensive line
And
caught
bad
up to them.
officiating. Bad officiating.
Yeah.
Game-changing officiating.
I don't remember exactly how I felt about every call, but yeah,
The Cedric Wilson thing was
Oh,
crazy.
yeah.
You got a face mask, and that
was bad.
that was
Yeah.
really bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think they'll be fine.
But you're still DolphIN.
I think I'm still DolphIN. I think they'll be fine. I'm not terribly
You
worried.
DolphIN?
Are people DolphOUT?
What does that mean? What do I think they can win the Super Bowl? Yes, they obviously look like a team that can win the Super Bowl if they're healthy.
That's DolphIN.
You're DolphIN.
Okay,
You're not
I guess
DolphIN.
I am. We all miss you. You go away for a couple of weeks. It's unacceptable. I want to know what the withdrawal feels like because they have said of Tony Kornheiser for years that he cannot retire because if he were to retire, he would just be going to the plants in his home and giving his sports opinions to the plants in his home. Is the baby getting any sports opinions? How much do you miss? You have been in the daily grind of snorting football year round in a way that is addictive and a bit nuts. You care about this stuff and obsess about this stuff in a way that's truly passionate. How much have you missed not being able to give your opinions on football in front of a microphone?
Well, we were talking about this before we started a little bit, and I struggled to convey the millions of your listeners are like, I have a kid. I know exactly what this was like. It's like I have more time and less time at the same time. Christopher Nolan really should do a movie about like the first 4 weeks of having a baby. If you thought Tenet was like a trip, because that's just, you're just like, where did the day go? But then I was on my phone because, you know, when I'm feeding him or whatever.
Yeah. What's your screen time telling you?
It's not
about
great.
You?
It's alarming. But it's also, I'm like, what did I watch? I am up to the Amethyst League on Duolingo Korean, but I don't feel like I've learned any Korean. It's you know, by the way, Duolingo, why are they always trying to make you befriend people? You guys are on Duolingo. They're always trying to make you befriend people on it. It's like, I don't want to be friends with Mike S. in Kansas, who's giving me a high five because I learned Korean verbs, you know? But I'm watching a lot of football and a lot. And so, like, I'm watching more college football than ever because I'm home
What's
on
your thought on
Saturdays.
ACC officiating?
I have not watched Miami. You keep asking me about players
Ruben
who are
Bain.
not even draft
Well, you're
eligible
gonna
this year.
when you prep
Don't do
for
this.
the draft in 2 years, and Ruben Baines talked about as a #1 overall pick. I want you to go back to the Clemson film.
I actually feel like being a Huskies fan this year is kind of what it must feel like being a Miami fan in terms of just like you're watching your offense like do crazy stuff and completely obliterate.
You mean a Miami Dolphins fan?
Yes.
Certainly not a
No,
Miami
sorry.
Hurricanes fan.
Totally ran into the powerhouse that is ASU. Yeah. So to actually answer your question, sorry, I feel like I'm taking it all in, and it has nowhere to go. I'm very active in many group chats now, perhaps sharing my opinions there. I don't really mind not being on TV or having a place to send them all, but I am excited because it's not like I'm like, oh, I'm so clogged and it's going to be a take explosion or whatever. It's more just like, oh man, like I'm noticing so many interesting things. I can't wait to have conversations with people about them.
What has surprised you about motherhood? What is it that you had no idea that you were embarking upon?
I'm trying to decide how real to be because it's all really gross, visceral stuff. Just how like animalistic it all is. I think just
Primal.
it's primal, yeah. And just like you're really keeping another human alive. And I'm not good at that. I killed all my Tamagotchis. I've never successfully kept a plant going. So
I have a hard time with cacti.
Yeah.
Keeping cacti alive.
We have a lot of plants in our house, and my husband takes care of all of them.
Yeah.
I do not.
Yeah.
I guess Lenny was good practice on that front, but yeah, it really, and it really does. It's weird because it actually requires all your attention, but it's like, it's not like work attention where you're like, you have to be like dialed in. It's just like you actually just have to hold him.
Yeah. And you're not necessarily getting
crying.
the positive reinforcement that you're getting is just they've stopped crying for a little bit of a minute here because they needed to fart.
Yes. A win is, and also like just going back to the physical aspect of it, you're just constantly in weird positions and you have to stay there.
Yeah.
Like the other day, like yesterday, I was sitting on my sofa and he had finally stopped crying, but he was like on one arm, so that arm couldn't do anything. And then Lenny was on my legs. It was like misery, like Kathy Bates, like I was just like, well, I guess I'm just here now. And I just had to stay in that position for 45 minutes because I was trapped by...
Do I have this wrong as someone who is childless? It seems to me like the first 6 months of having a child wouldn't come with a great many obvious rewards. That you've succeeded by keeping the child alive, but the interactions, you can't... Whatever the connection is not obviously a spoken connection. It's something that must be felt.
Yeah, that's true. He doesn't speak to me. You're correct.
Yeah.
He hasn't said thank you yet for anything.
It'd be nice when it gets there.
It won't ever.
Nice.
It won't come until his teens or 20s. Like it's not coming soon.
It's from my perspective as a father is like when Juliet started reacting, and that doesn't happen for like at least 8 months. Then you start like, oh, you're not just a wet potato.
Yes.
I remember with you.
A beautiful, wonderful wet potato that I have to keep alive. But the first few months, they just look so uncomfortable and you're trying to figure out how to help. And they're not exactly there to tell you like, oh, yeah, no, that's working.
Yeah.
It's difficult.
Yes. Right. Because when they're crying, you're just going through your like, all right, like the decision tree of like, did he poop? Yeah. Okay. I fed him. I held him. What's going on right now?
He could be dying or he needs the burp. It could be either one of those two.
Yeah. I think right now the validation is less so from my son and more so like feeling, it's gonna sound weird, but like proud of myself for doing things I didn't know I could do. Literally body doing things that I just never occurred to me or whatever. And then like the teamwork aspect with my husband. This is going to sound really corny, but like,
it's beautiful.
It's at the end of the day when like we actually did the day and it was tough and we got through it together. I'm proud of us for being a team and like it has brought us closer together.
That's where love, I would imagine, grows around
yes.
Becoming about someone else's life instead of your own. Like I would assume that that's the thing that people rave about or why they choose parenthood.
Well, it was always about money anyways, but
yeah, no, it's got to be like, the offensive defensive coordinator, like high-fiving, we did it. Your side of the ball came through today. I called some good plays.
Game ball.
Occasionally an in-law comes around and special teams did its job.
And then our quarterback is like, he's our Brock Purdy, just executing the system, trying to turn the ball over. So that part is validating. And so it's like it right now. Do I sound like I'm patting myself on the back?
No. I mean, it's as someone that has gone through it, it's not as revelatory, but I do think that the audience appreciates what your experience is with it because they've known you a certain way the entire time. And, like you've said it yourself, it's not necessarily something you ever really envisioned for yourself, motherhood.
Yeah, I think as also
you gave like the most analytical answer to Pablo Torre that I've shown like 6 friends this video because it was so quintessentially Mina, like her talking about becoming a mother and how analytical she was about the decision to get there.
Here's something I'll say that it has surprised me. That's beyond just like, wow, my boobs leak now. By the way,
so do mine.
I've been looking down every now and then. I am someone who my whole life has struggled a little bit with personal pride in like doing a thing. In this, to bring it back to the internet.
If you could bring it back to Kirk Cousins later on, that'd be great.
Yeah, I'll try. If I get 99 comments and 98 are, I don't know, I just said 100, 99 are positive and one's negative, the negative one stands out to me. I'm not like, wow, I really crushed that. I don't feel that, but I feel my failures a lot more acutely. This is one where it's almost like that dynamic has reversed. I don't feel like the failures are expected and the successes are surprising. Does that make sense?
Wow, it just allows you to be super gentle with yourself. What a great gift for a child to give you.
You put it that way, yes. I'm like, because you know what?
Like Kirk Cousins.
No, it's less Kirk Cousins. I am more of the Brock Purdy in this analogy because I went into this with very low expectations.
I've seen the reports. You are not getting that salary.
Pick 199 in a parent draft, y'all. Like nobody was like, she is gonna crush this.
Your cap number is not as friendly.
I am I am lucky when I complete a pass. I'm like, oh my God. And maybe Deebo Samuel took it for 80 yards, but that screen was on time. And so,
you're surprised when you succeed as a parent.
That's you are articulating it as you do.
Is that because you just never had expectations for it?
Never had expectations. Not something I thought I would be great at. Not like I was like, wow, I'm gonna fail. This is gonna be awful. But like, it's just not. I go at when I was in school and I would go into a test, anything less than hey, I'd be like, you were the worst. I go in with certain expectations. I did not go into parenthood expecting to crush it. Every morning, I do not expect to crush it. I mostly expect to fail. I expect he's going to cry a lot. When I try to change his diaper, it looks fucked up. And when the nurse does it, it looks amazing. And I'm like, what? How? Why? Wait, this is so simple. Why? It's on his head, the tape is like around his body, like the mummy. So anyways, every day I go into the day being like, and when I do something right, when he like kind of smiles, he's probably just burping, but I'll call it a smile. I'm like, damn, I actually feel pretty proud of myself.
Oh.
That is wonderful. What a great gift for a child
That's
to give
what we were
you.
looking for.
I don't think people understand.
It's your heartwarming moment. Sponsored by Campbell.
Maybe they do enjoy it. Mina's feelings, sponsored by Venmo. She is so prepared. Mina, I always used to laugh because it's highly questionable. Like, look, my dad's doing it over there in his second language. Like, why are you so prepared? You're too prepared. This one doesn't come with a whole lot of, it must be, to me, it sounds, given your personality type, like the responsibility of this before choosing it would feel totally overwhelming because how do you prepare for this?
That's the other thing. I am not a prepared parent. Like, I play it as it lays. I am not, like, I'm trying, but I really am not like, I have to read this and optimize every decision and if it's going to be the end of the world. I'm like, we made it.
Yeah.
What a great gift for a child to give you, Mina. Seriously, not just the idea that you would be more forgiving of yourself, but that you would also allow yourself to be less constrained by your own limits or things that you do to protect your insecurities so that you won't feel insecure.
This is how Kirk Cousins is playing now. He is not mechanical. He's just throwing it up to Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison and hoping one of them comes down with the football.
Yeah.
You brought it around, Mina. Congratulations.
Yeah.
How childhood is about Kirk Cousins. How everything is about Kirk Cousins. She's ready to get back in the game.